On today's episode of Film and Whiskey, we continue our How to Cocktail series with a tried and true classic, the Whiskey Sour. We talk about how to make a great sour mix, what ratios of lemon to sugar you should use, whether or not you should use an egg white, and we cap it all off with the review of some fantastic syrups from Boozy Botanicals. That's all next on Film and Whiskey. Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. We are back with another special bonus episode. Today we are continuing our series that we are calling How to Cocktail. This is a pretty simple idea, Brad. We just wanted to walk people through some basic whiskey cocktails and how to make them. We've all been stuck at home doing this quarantine thing for, I don't know, what it's been like 6 years now, I think?
I think it's around like only 2 or 3 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see, the time is just bleeding into day after day, and I have no idea. So I decided I want to start making myself cocktails, because if I'm not going to know what day it is, I might as well not know what day it is because I am hammered drunk. So, Brad and I have come up with this series. We're just walking through some really basic, really prominent whiskey cocktails. We talked about the old-fashioned. We've talked about the Rob Roy. And today we're going to talk about one of the world's most popular whiskey cocktails and one of its easiest to make, the Whiskey Sour.
See, Bob, I'm not going to lie. Throwing the egg white in here, I don't think this would come across as one of the easiest drinks to make. And I'll take it one step further and say, I've never had a whiskey sour in my life.
Wow, dude. So, yeah. Okay, so let me break down what you just said, though, because the egg white in a whiskey sour, I know a lot of people like egg white in their whiskey sour. I like to put egg white in mine, is actually not a necessary ingredient in the drink. It's something that came up a lot later after the drink was invented. And we're going to break down kind of the history of the drink, how to make it, whether or not you should add an egg white. But before we go any further, I have to call you out a little bit, Brad. Mr. Bartender, you've never had a whiskey sour before?
Nah, bro. I like
really.
I've made all sorts of stuff. But yeah.
Have you made a whiskey sour before?
Yeah, I've made a whiskey sour before.
Right.
I'd never made it with an egg white. I was never at that fancy of a bar.
Oh, okay. You were in a dive, huh?
I mean, I wouldn't call it a dive. You just don't normally have, a carton of eggs behind the bar.
I totally get that, Brad, but we are going to talk about what it looks like to add an egg white into your drink, not just a whiskey sour, but, what kind of a purpose adding an egg white serves. I know some people can be kind of nervous about adding raw egg into their beverage, so we'll get to that point. But Brad, it's time for us to kind of introduce this drink. And so I have to ask, Mr. Bartender, Mr. Keeper of the History of Spirits, what exactly is a whiskey sour?
Well, a whiskey sour is a whiskey mixed drink, just in case you didn't know, Bob.
Oh, perfect. I'm going to put my vodka back. I feel embarrassed now.
But no, sours, they're kind of their own set of drinks. They originated from a long, long time ago. And by long time ago, I mean like centuries ago, when sailors would be out there on the open ocean and water was hard to come by. Because they're out in the ocean, and beer would go sour after a while. So they took a lot of liquor with them, and they would mix citrus type things with them to fight off scurvy. And so that's kind of like where this came from. And so any sort of sour mixed drink usually uses some sort of citrus, sugar, spirit type of stuff.
Yeah, it's basically a mixture of citrus, spirit, sugar, and water. And that's exactly what the whiskey sour is. It's really no different. Now, I do want to say up front, Brad and I drink a lot of bourbon on this show. We dabble in Scotch and Irish and rye from time to time. The whiskey sour does not...
Don't forget about them Canadians.
No, the whiskey sour does not require that you use bourbon, although most recipes that you'll find will recommend bourbon. I do think bourbon is the best whiskey to use for this drink, although I have used rye, and we'll actually get to a little bit later. I used rye specifically for the one I made for this episode. But I would recommend using it with bourbon.
Yeah, and the important thing isn't necessarily the type of whiskey. Honestly, I would make, 10 different whiskey sours over 10 days and try different whiskeys to figure out which whiskey you like in the drink.
Oh, for sure.
But really, the important thing is finding the preferred mix to the recipe.
Like the sour mix, right?
Yeah. Like what are you going to be using? Like the ratio of lemon to sugar? Are you going to use orange instead of lemon or lime? Like, and obviously orange would make it a little bit different of a drink, but like what kind of sour are you going to use? And what's the ratio of sugar to sour that you want in your drink? Because it really is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think that applies across drinks. I mean, if you're making a margarita, you want to know what your preferred sour mix is. If you go to the store and you buy sour mix off the shelf, like, no judgment, I think we've all done it at some point. However, I think it's easier and way cheaper to make it home. And also the stuff that you get off the shelf at the grocery store is like, I mean, it's loaded with sugar. It's so sweet. And so some people like their sour mix a little bit sweeter, and we're going to walk through a recipe for the whiskey sour that is sweet. But I don't know if we always need to lean so sugar heavy in our cocktails.
Yeah, well, and that kind of takes us to our first, kind of classic recipe. And this is kind of a classic ratio for drinks in general. It's going to be 2 ounces of your bourbon, 1 ounce of your lemon juice, and a half ounce of simple syrup. And that's your simple, basic 2, 1, and a half.
Yep.
And that's it.
I mean, it's called the golden ratio for sour beverages. You always have 2 parts strong, 1 part sour, 1/2 part sweet. And, we've gone over this before, Brad, but when we talk about simple syrup, it's very, very easy to make. Guys, I know that it's really easy to reach for like a White Claw, and I like pounding White Claws, and I've talked about that on this show before. But I think making really basic drinks, it's super rewarding. And we are walking through like the simplest beverages to make here. So if you want to make simple syrup, honestly, all you need to do is equal parts sugar and water, put them in your little saucepan and heat it on the stove until the sugar dissolves into the syrup. You let it cool off, and then you have simple syrup. It's 1-to-1 simple syrup. Sometimes you'll see recipes call for rich simple syrup, which is 2-to-1 sugar to water, and that takes a little longer to dissolve. Obviously, it's a much thicker syrup, but in most cases, when you see simple syrup on a recipe, it just means a 1-to-1 sugar to water ratio.
And this is just a tip to the average novice bartender at home. As long as you have a shot glass, you can always measure stuff out.
Yeah.
A shot glass is 1.5 ounces. And so if you fill it up fully with bourbon, dump it in, and then fill it up about a third, dump it in, there's your 2 ounces.
Yep.
If something calls for 3/4 of an ounce, that's half of a shot glass.
Now, I will say, I would recommend, like, if you're going to be at home, look, quarantine has changed our lives dramatically. Normally, I wouldn't recommend stuff like this because I don't care enough. But, like, when quarantine hit, I bought myself a little home bartending kit on Amazon, and it was like $20. It is the cheapest thing they make, and it literally just comes with 2 shaker tins and a Hawthorne strainer and, a little bar spoon and a jigger. And that's literally all you need. I would recommend, especially for making this drink, and I'll post the link to the one I have in the show notes. It's super cheap. Get yourself a couple cocktail shakers. Get yourself a jigger. I really think that a jigger comes in handy. It measures things out by the ounce or the half ounce. And so you're not always eyeballing things, because I can pour a little liberally when I'm eyeballing things. So I do think it's worth it to invest in just a really cheap jigger and a set of cocktail shakers.
Yeah, it is really nice to have. And it's kind of fun, right? You have your friends over, and you're like, hey, I'm going to make a whiskey sour for you. And you pull out the utensils, you start measuring it out, you shake it up like a professional.
Yep.
You do a little spin in your hand because you want to look cool. And then you throw it down and you're like, yeah, I just made you a mixed drink, and it's going to be amazing.
It's so fun to do. And, getting back to the recipe for this drink, there are actually 2 recipes that I've used for a whiskey sour, kind of depending on the mood that I'm in. Brad just walked us through the first one. It's that 2-to-1 to 1/2 ratio. And this makes a much less sweet version of the whiskey sour. If you don't like cloyingly sweet drinks, I think this is the route to go. The lemon really stands out here. I do think sometimes the lemon can kind of tend to overshadow the bourbon or the whiskey in your drink. So if you're making it this way, I would kind of opt for like a little higher proof. I like to use 100 proof bourbon in my cocktail so that it stands up to that amount of sour. But if you're not super big on having an overly sour drink, if you want it to be a little sweeter, there's a second recipe that we can walk you through, and it's the one that I actually made today. And it's actually more of the standard that you see in bars nowadays. It's kind of the more modern way of making the whiskey sour. And it's just this tiny variation. 2 ounces of whiskey, 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice, 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup. So you're just doing equal lemon juice and simple syrup. This version I find to be a lot more balanced. It's definitely sweeter, but because you have the sweetness kind of balancing out that lemon, I actually find that you can taste the whiskey a little bit more. It doesn't really drown it out, and you get a little bit more of that alcohol burn, which is kind of what I'm looking for in a cocktail that has whiskey in it.
Well, whereas you are a little bit of a sweet kind of guy, Bob, I'm a classy dude. So I actually went with the classic recipe today, 2, 1 1/2.
So I like that we kind of split the difference here, Brad, and we're going with each of the different variants that we've walked through so far. But Brad, can you tell us exactly how to make it? We've got our ingredients now. We know exactly how much to use. How do you build this drink?
Well, and we're going to talk about it in 2 ways. The first way, we'll just talk about the classic, maneuver in which you'd make this drink. We'll also talk about what it looks like when you make it with an egg white.
Sure.
But if you're just making it without the egg white, you're just going to take the ingredients, put them into your tin, your shaker with some ice cubes, shake the heck out of it. I mean, just go to town on that thing. Open it up, pour it in strained into your glass, and enjoy. You can throw a few ice cubes in there, and you are all set. Like it's really that easy, guys. Just put the ingredients in with some ice, shake it up, strain it over your glass, and boom, you're all set.
And the beautiful thing, if you're not using the egg white, so if you're just going like the bare minimum of what it means to be called a whiskey sour, those 3 ingredients, you can put it in any glass you want to. I mean, you can drink it out of a Solo cup for all we care. But like, you can put it in an old-fashioned glass, like a rocks glass, over a couple ice cubes.
I'll take a pint of whiskey sour, please.
But I mean, you could also go the fancy route and use your coupe glass. We talked about what a coupe glass was in our Rob Roy episode. It's that kind of Great Gatsby champagne toasting glass. I like to serve my drinks in a coupe glass because you can't put ice in them because they're so small. So you have to serve them straight up, which is where you strain the ice out of it. You know, you strain the liquid through your strainer, the ice stays in the tin, and you have this beautiful looking presentation. But honestly, if you're just using those 3 ingredients, you can serve it in whatever you want to, however you want to.
But if you want to level up your whiskey sour game, Bob, I'm not going to lie, this whiskey sour with a bit of egg white in it is kissed by the gods.
Dude, it's so good.
It is so spectacular.
Listen, I figured that like a good chunk of our episode was going to be spent explaining to people why you should use egg white in your drink. Because, you know, especially as Americans, we have a real aversion to things that aren't cooked all the way through. You know what I mean? So like, a raw egg white does not seem like something that should be going in your body at first, but let us break it down for you a little bit.
I was going to say, we've all heard the stories about bodybuilders literally just cracking like 6 eggs in a glass and then drinking it straight. Like, it's safe.
Yes.
All right.
So here's the thing.
It's totally fine.
The chances of you getting salmonella are slim to none, and especially because if you're using, let's just say you take an egg out of the fridge and you crack it, right? So you want to separate the egg white from the yolk. Hopefully we all know how to separate an egg white, but if you don't, you split the egg open in half, you juggle the yolk back and forth until the white falls out. That's literally all you have to do.
There's also a thing called Google and YouTube.
Exactly.
It'll
but they don't know what that is,
amazing.
Brad. That's why they come to us for all their life advice.
That's true.
That's right. So let's just say you use an egg for your egg white. The chances of you getting salmonella from an egg white are slim to none. If it was a raw yolk, we'd have a different story on our hands. But really, there's no issue with an egg white. If you feel a little hesitant about it, though, you can go to the store and buy a carton of those pasteurized egg whites. I've done it before because it's actually easier for me to use that when I'm making drinks because you don't have to crack as many eggs. You don't have to separate. There's not as much waste, right? And so if you're going to go that route and just pour the carton of egg whites, do a 1/2 ounce for every drink you're going to make. Every egg white would equal about a 1/2 ounce.
Yeah, and if you're choosing to use an egg white in your drink, and we'll talk about why you should in a second, but if you're going to do it, then you're actually going to use the dry shake method. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to pour all of your ingredients, the whiskey, the sour, and the sweet, into the shaker, and then you're going to put your egg white right in with it, but you're not going to put ice in. You're just going to put the ingredients in, including the egg white, shake the heck out of it. Once it's been shaken that first time, you're going to add some ice in, then shake it again, and then strain it, and you do not put ice in with a egg white whiskey sour.
Yeah, and here's why. So, like, for any of us that have ever had, like, a lemon meringue pie, you know that when you whip egg whites, they make this really beautiful foam, and if you continue to whip them, they make these nice stiff peaks that we can turn into meringue. When you put an egg white into your drink, you're breaking down the proteins in the egg white, and it makes a nice foam. And what it does to, like, the body of your cocktail is it makes it, like, silky soft and just velvety. It just adds such a layer of drinkability to it. It takes all the edge off of the lemon, all the edge off of the sugar, all the edge off of the bourbon, and just really marries everything together. And it gives you this nice little head of foam, you know, like a beer that you pour from on tap. The problem is when you put ice in the shaker with your egg white, it breaks that foam down. So you really don't want to dump that. If you've spent all this time shaking with an egg white, you don't want to dump it into a glass that has ice in it because it'll just collapse your foam. It really takes away from not just the presentation, but also like the overall flavor of the whole thing. There's another method that you can use called the reverse dry shake, which is actually the opposite of what Brad just explained, where you put the three main ingredients in your shaker first with ice, get it nice and chilled down, and then just dump the ice, add your egg white, shake again, and then immediately strain into your glass. I think that it keeps the foam a little bit better. Whatever method you want to use to shake your drink, I think both of us would probably recommend when you're making a whiskey sour, go for the egg white. Like, it's not going to hurt you, and it really does take this drink up to the next level.
Well, I will say, just, wait till our next episode comes out. I'll give you a report on whether or not the egg white has harmed me.
If Brad isn't on the next episode, then you know that the egg white had adverse effects.
When Bob's hosting this podcast by himself, you know. But today, we're actually making our drinks. Well, at the very least, I made my drink with some Boozy Botanicals. And Bob, this stuff is spectacular.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, Brad, we have been lucky enough to work with a couple companies that make simple syrups. And again, guys, like, you can make your own simple syrup at home. It's very, very easy to make. But sometimes you want to change it up a little bit. And the whiskey sour is the perfect beverage to try to just kind of find different variants on. And so we contacted this company called Boozy Botanicals from Kansas City, and they sent us some different flavored syrups. And in particular, they sent us a syrup that is vanilla allspice flavored, and then another one that is lavender Earl Grey. It is like, they're both just such phenomenal syrups. And the first one, Brad, the vanilla allspice, has this wonderful sort of fall flavor to it. I've been trying to find a way to work apple cider into my whiskey sours, and I'm using this to kind of sweeten everything. I still have yet to hit the perfect ratio with that cider to syrup thing, but like, I've been adding this thing to my coffee in the mornings. I've been pouring it over vanilla ice cream. Like, their products, guys, are fantastic. They're not alcoholic. All of their ingredients are natural. They're super affordable. I think that each bottle is about 12 and a half ounces, which is about 24 serving sizes, and they retail for about $15 to $17. So it's really a good value, and the flavors are so highly concentrated that it's just like, it's so decadent, Brad. And I made two whiskey sours. I made one with the vanilla allspice, and I also made another one with the lavender Earl Grey. And I'd love to give my thoughts, but Brad, what do you think of these?
Well, Bob, the fascinating part about that is that they actually sent me different bottles from you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have
cool.
rosemary mint and cardamom spice.
Oh, dude, that sounds fantastic. Which one did you elect to use today?
Tonight, because today has been such a warm, almost summer feeling day, despite being early mid-October, I used the rosemary mint. It just sounded refreshing and cool, and so I threw that in there. And Bob, it made a spectacular whiskey sour. Now I know I said earlier that this is the first one I've ever had, but this simple syrup gave it a little bit of pop that I didn't know a mixed drink could have. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie, though, the cardamom spice smells like Christmas. And like, I can't wait to make a whiskey sour on like a dark, snowy evening and just have that spicy warmth of the cardamom come in and just make my night.
Yeah, man. These are going to, well, especially the vanilla allspice, that's not going to last me much longer. If you go on Boozy Botanicals' website, they have a ton of recommendations and recipes for different cocktails you can make. They also say that you can, enjoy their syrups on top of yogurt, on ice cream, on fruit. I mean, there's a ton of different permutations that you can use with this. I will say, Brad, that I used bourbon for my vanilla allspice whiskey sour, and then I used the lavender Earl Grey syrup with a new whiskey that we just received in the mail, which we're going to be reviewing here in just a week or so, from the Few Company in Illinois. They have a new rye that they're making called Immortal Rye, which is infused with tea. And so I kind of like doubled up on the tea theme to make this whiskey sour. It was the most unique and delicious whiskey sour. Like it just had such a strong kind of, black tea taste to it. I absolutely loved it.
Dude, I'm not even going to wait. That Few whiskey is so good.
It's so good. I almost hated to use 2 ounces of it in a whiskey sour, but I had to do it for the podcast, for the content, Brad.
For the listeners.
That's right, for science. So, guys, what we're saying is, first of all, Boozy Botanicals is a fantastic company. If you are looking to take your cocktail game up a notch, I highly recommend looking up their website. It's boozybotanicals.com, exactly how it sounds. Check them out. It is well worth the price, and you get a really, really large, beautiful kind of flask of this syrup. I would highly recommend the vanilla allspice. The lavender Earl Grey, I think, is exceptional as well. Brad's talking about some cardamom spice. That's going to be great coming up for the winter. So please, please check them out. And we want to say thank you again for them sending us these bottles of syrup.
Yeah, Boozy Botanicals is really onto something. They have some great flavors coming out. Bob, honestly, we need to get together and just have a whiskey sour party and try out all these different flavors.
Yeah, man. I am 100% down for that. And we hope that you have learned a little something here today about making the whiskey sour. An incredibly easy cocktail to make. If you want to take it to the next level, add that egg white. It makes everything just velvety and smooth. And Brad, it's a welcome addition to our arsenal that we're building of whiskey cocktails.
Yeah, this little mini series that we've been doing on cocktails has just been awesome. I think it's such a great opportunity for Film and Whiskey Nation to up their game. I can't tell you how many people have been introduced to whiskey by having it in a mixed drink first. It can be hard to be introduced to the world of whiskey by just drinking it straight. So if you ever want to get a friend to try whiskey, just be like, hey man, I'm going to make you a whiskey sour. It's going to be the greatest thing you've ever tasted. Boozy Botanicals has some great stuff. I'm going to throw that in there as well. Like, let's go. And it's such a great way to get people into it. I would highly recommend figure out, 2 or 3 mixed drinks you can make for your friends and family whenever they come over.
Well, that does it for us today. We are going to be back on Monday with a regularly scheduled episode. Looking at the movie Straight Outta Compton. So join us for that on Monday. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.